Hello, my name is Marc Riera, and I will give my presentation entitled Niche Shifts in Non-Native Plants are more closely related to native niche breadth than to plant traits and human-driven introduction history. Climate matching is a useful tool to predict areas of invasion. The idea is that one can take the occupancy of climatic conditions in the native range to predict where the species will be present in the invaded range. However, this prediction is most reliable when there is niche conservatism. Niche conservatism is a pattern of similar occupancy of climatic conditions between the native and the invaded ranges. In the example that you see on the slide, the plant occupies different conditions in the native and the invaded ranges, which tends to make the prediction of its spread unreliable. Then, given the importance of niche conservatism for basic and applied ecology, we set out to investigate which factors shape niche conservatism in non-native plants. We formulated a series of hypotheses. We hypothesized that niche conservatism would be greater among unintentionally introduced plants, because intentionally introduced plants are usually cared for, and it's possible that human care allows to expand their niche into more extreme climates. We also hypothesized that shrubs and trees would have more niche conservatism than herbs. Possibly the faster life cycles of Earth correlate to a greater evolution in their fundamental niche and therefore less niche conservatism. We hypothesized also that plants introduced a long time ago would have more niche conservatism than recent introductions. We finally hypothesized that plants with a wide niche in their native range would have more niche conservatism than those with narrow niches in their native range because they have less climatic space left to occupy. We tested this hypothesis using a set of 164 plants invading mainland Spain. We gathered georeferenced occurrences from the 𝐧𝐢𝐜𝐼F portal and the identity of the native range for each species from the Plants of the World Online webpage. We then extracted climatic data from the WorldClim dataset and performed a principal component analysis to express the niche in a reduced two-dimensional ordination space. In green, you see outlined the native niche, and in red, the invaded niche. This reduced ordination space allowed us to calculate 4 niche components to test our hypothesis of drivers of niche conservatism. Niche stability was the niche component that was related to niche conservatism. It signified the climatic conditions that were available and occupied in both the native and the invaded ranges. We also calculated niche unfilling, which describes the occupancy of climatic conditions that, although available in both ranges, are only occupied in the native range. Similarly, niche expansion described niche occupancy of conditions available in both ranges, but only occupied in the invaded one. And finally, niche pioneering described niche occupancy of conditions only available in the invaded range. These 4 niche components added up to 1. We know that in many cases there were climatic conditions exclusive to the native range, which we might call niche abandonment, but this was outside of our research hypothesis. We then fitted a Dirichlet regression to test how these niche components were related to introduction pathway, growth form, minimum residence time, native niche breadth. We also calculated the relative importance of these predictors in terms of their contribution to the explained variation. Our results provide substantial evidence of niche conservatism. For the average invader, niche stability is 75% of all niche occupancy, and indeed for a majority of plant invaders, niche stability is the dominant component. However, in many cases, unfilling is important as well, indicating that there is an important part of climatic space that is occupied only in the native range, even though it is also available in the invaded range. A more rare phenomenon is that plants expand their niche into climatic conditions that, although available in the native range, are not occupied there. And an even rarer phenomenon is that a few plants are able to pioneer their niche into climatic conditions that they were just not there in the native range and only available in the invaded one. As for the underlying drivers, the most important correlate was native niche breadth. Niche conservatism correlated strongly to wide niche in the native range. Plants with wide native niches had more stability and less expansion and pioneering, supporting our initial hypothesis that they have less climatic space left to occupy. The second most important correlate was minimum residence time. Older introductions tended to have a more conserved niche. Plants introduced a long time ago had more stability and less unfeeling. This suggests that as the invasion progresses, plants reach an equilibrium in their invaded range by invading conditions that they were already invading in their native range. The third most important predictor was growth form, and contrary to our hypothesis, niche conservatism was greater among herbs than shrubs and trees. This suggests that faster life cycles among herbs do not necessarily translate into less niche conservatism. It is possible that shrubs and trees have less niche conservatism because they are usually cared for. In other words, we might see here an indirect effect of introduction pathways, although we did not see a direct effect of introduction pathways. Introduction pathways are unrelated to niche conservatism, and in fact, they explained less variation than phylogenetic relatedness, which we express numerically as a phylogenetic covariate. To provide some take-home message, we can say that similar niche occupancy between the native and the invaded ranges provides support for the niche conservatism hypothesis. In other words, non-native plants in Spain occupy similar climatic conditions in their invaded range than in their native range. Moreover, we have seen that niche conservatism is a continuum rather than a binary yes-no phenomenon. Plants exhibit a wall variation between those that have a very conserved niche and those that have a very not conserved niche. We provide evidence that plants that tend to have high niche conservatism are those with a wide niche in their native range, those that were introduced a long time ago, and herbs rather than shrubs and trees. Moreover, we found that the most important correlate was native niche breadth, indicating that the ability to tolerate a wide range of conditions influences the extent of niche conservatism more than plant traits such as growth form or human-driven introduction factors, such as minimum residence time or the introduction pathway. That will be all. Thank you very much for your attention. I would like to thank my supervisors and my co-authors and all the funding agencies. And should you have any question, please, let's have a chat. Have a nice day. Goodbye.